Hello and welcome to Alaska Weather. So happy you could join us. I'm meteorologist Amanda Bowen. We will head straight into our hazardous weather because there is quite a lot to talk about. We have a blizzard warning currently in effect for the North Slope. That is going to be in effect through Friday morning. We're looking at whiteout conditions along the North Slope with blowing snow, wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour, and the potential for significant drifting snow as well. We also have a blowing snow advisory in effect for the interior. That is going to be through the day on Friday, and we're also looking at blowing snow there, especially along the summits of the interior highway passes. So that's where we're looking for the strongest winds, the most blowing snow, and the most impact with visibility lowering quite a bit with that blowing snow. We also have a wind advisory in effect through the Alaska Range passes. We're looking at southerly winds there up to about 65 miles per hour, which is going to make it more difficult, especially for vehicular traffic through the passes. That's in effect through midnight Friday night. In the southern portion of the state, we are looking at two high wind watches. The first is for the Kuskokwim Delta coast. That is going to be in effect Friday evening through Saturday morning with the likely potential for gusts to 70 miles per hour out of the southeast. Those are it's a little bit of a strange direction for winds for this time of year, and also pretty strong winds for this time of year. So a little bit of a special situation for the Kuskokwim Delta coast. We're looking at the potential for power outages, as well as the potential for sea ice to push up against the shoreline with those southeasterly winds. The second high wind watch that we have in effect is for the coastal southern panhandle, and that is in effect from Friday. That is in effect from Friday night through Saturday night. We're looking at strong winds with gusts 60 miles an hour or even a little bit higher. Could bring down trees and cause some power outages there. So plenty going on across the state. If you have any of these watches, warnings, or advisories in effect for your area, please make sure that you're paying attention to the weather and prepare for these hazardous weather conditions. As we move forward, taking a look at our satellite imagery, we can see a little bit of rotation in the northeastern Pacific associated with a developing low pressure system there. Lots of clouds associated with it as well, and lots of clouds over the mainland today. That's due to low pressure both in the northern Bering off the west coast, as well as a second low that is in the northeast Pacific, and it's going to be moving north towards the Alaska Peninsula. So for today, we've got those blizzard conditions across the North Slope, as well as blowing snow across much of the interior and portions of the west coast as well. For tonight, that low pressure that's in the northeastern Pacific is going to be moving northward to the Alaska Peninsula and strengthening down to about 970 millibars. That's going to increase the pressure gradient across the state. So the lines of pressure that you see on the map are getting tighter together, and that means that our winds are also getting stronger. So plenty of blowing snow across much of the interior again tonight, with some snow and rain developing across southwest ahead of that system. As we head into Friday, that low continues to deepen down to about 967 millibars as it moves off to the northwest through the Bristol Bay area and into the eastern Bering. That's when we're going to get our strongest winds and most blowing snow in the southwestern portion of the state when that high wind watch is in effect Friday into Saturday. Also, still plenty of blowing snow across the northern part of the state as we have high pressure centered north of the state and this strong low pressure in the eastern Bering. We'll also see the occluded front from that low pressure system stretching all the way across the Gulf and starting to impact the panhandle with the return of rain and snow there, as well as the potential for those strong winds in the southern panhandle. And for Saturday, we start to see, that low pressure in the Bering moves further west, and it also weakens some, although it's still pretty strong. But we start to see the lessening of the pressure gradient. Again, if you look at those black lines on the surface map, they're getting a little bit further apart, which is going to be indicating the winds are going to be decreasing some. There's still going to be breezy conditions across the interior. We're still looking at blowing snow, but probably not winds quite as strong on Saturday as what we're seeing right now or during the day on Friday. For southeast, we have another low pressure system that's going to be approaching the panhandle. That's going to be bringing additional rain and snow for Saturday. Looking at temperatures for Friday morning across the southeastern portion of the state as well as south central, we're looking at low temperatures generally in the upper 20s to low and mid 30s. We've got 26 there at Haines, 30 at Juneau. We've got 36 at Sitka for Friday morning, 34 for Anchorage, and Seward at 36 degrees Friday morning. Friday afternoon, we're not going to see a whole lot in the way of warming across any of this region. That's because this is where we're going to see breezy conditions as well as rain and snow moving into the area, and both of those are going to prevent the temperatures from rising too much on Friday afternoon. So we're looking at just upper 30s to low 40s for the panhandle, as well as much of south central and even the northern Alaska Peninsula. Looks like the warm spot there is actually Anchorage at 43, as well as Kodiak at 45 for Friday afternoon. Saturday morning, a couple of degrees cooler than Friday morning, but really not much in the way of change. We're still looking at low to mid 30s for the panhandle. Some upper 20s potentially for south central, with 28 there at Kenai and 29 at Valdez for Saturday morning. And then Saturday afternoon, a couple of degrees cooler than Friday, as those weather systems will have started to push through with a little bit cooler air on the other side. But again, just a couple of degrees, really not that big of a difference. We're looking at upper 30s to around 40 for most of the area. A couple of spots at 41 there, Anchorage, as well as Petersburg in the Panhandle. Looking at the northern side of the state, a very different story as usual. We're looking at very cold temperatures along the north slope, negative 14 there at Utqiagvik on Friday morning. The temperature is getting slightly more mild as we head south of the Brooks Range and into the interior. 13 there at Fairbanks, 22 at Delta Junction, and then even warmer as we look at the west coast ahead of that next system. 32, our warm spot there at Nome. Friday afternoon, warming across the interior up into the 20s and even some places getting above freezing. Nome, our warm spot there again at 37, but we also have Denali National Park at 36. Still quite cold as usual across the north slope. Negative 8 degrees, our cold spot there at Kaktovik. For Saturday morning, still in the negatives, but maybe slightly warmer in a couple of places for the north slope, and cooler across the interior, 14 there at Fairbanks, just 2 degrees for Fort Yukon on Saturday morning. And then Saturday afternoon, we'll see a cooling trend across the interior and a little bit of a warming trend across the north slope, with temperatures getting above 0 across the north slope, and not as many areas hitting above freezing for the interior and west coast. And for southwest on Friday morning, we are looking at temperatures generally in the 30s for the Kuskokwim Delta and Yukon Delta, low 30s with upper 30s across the Alaska Peninsula. 35 there at Dillingham, 38 at King Salmon on Friday morning. Friday afternoon, once again with that system coming in, we're not going to be seeing a whole lot of warming. So lows in the 30s, also highs in the 30s for Friday. 37 there at Bethel, and again, warm spot 45 at Kodiak for Friday afternoon. Saturday morning, we're looking at temperatures just a couple of degrees cooler as that system comes through. So 29 for Macoriac, we've got 32 for Dillingham, and 35 for Unalaska on Saturday morning. And for Saturday afternoon, we'll see temperatures a couple of degrees cooler than Friday afternoon. Again, that system kind of will have moved through by this point. So The southerly winds will not be as strong on Saturday afternoon. Southerly winds are generally what brings in that warmer air. So we are looking at 35 degrees for Bethel on Saturday afternoon and 40 at King Salmon.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to a look at your aviation forecast, starting with Friday morning's flying weather. Looks like we have quite a bit of IFR conditions along the west coast, as well as portions of the southwest near the YK Delta, as well as Bristol Bay, and then up across Kodiak Island and into the northern Gulf through the Prince William Sound area. Also IFR conditions for much of the northern panhandle on Friday morning. As we head into the day on Friday into Friday afternoon, we're looking at improvement along the west coast to MVFR or VFR conditions. Still IFR conditions along much of the immediate southwest coast, as well as those IFR conditions in Prince William Sound, expanding eastward into the northern panhandle. For Saturday morning, we have IFR conditions continuing in southwest along the coast, the YK Delta down through Bristol Bay, as well as IFR conditions continuing in the Prince William Sound area and expanding to pretty much the entirety of the panhandle for Saturday morning. Saturday afternoon, still those pesky IFR conditions sticking around for the southwest coast and the Prince William Sound area. Some improvement Saturday afternoon in the panhandle, that central panhandle area improving to MVFR, but still mostly IFR conditions for the panhandle on Saturday afternoon. Looking at our pass conditions for Friday, Anaktuvuk Pass starting the day MVFR and improving Friday afternoon to VFR. Same story at Adigan Pass starting out the day Friday at MVFR and improving to VFR Friday afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill passes both looking like IFR Friday morning and improving to MVFR Friday afternoon. Rainy Pass MVFR through the day on Friday, as well as Windy Pass also MVFR through the day on Friday. Isabel Pass also MVFR on Friday. Mentasta Pass starting the day at MVFR, but seeing improvement Friday afternoon to VFR conditions. Tanita Pass MVFR through the day on Friday. Portage Pass looking like IFR through the day on Friday. And Chilkoot and White Passes both also looking like IFR conditions throughout the day on Friday. As we take a look at our freezing levels, we can see that warm air out ahead of that low pressure system that is near the Bristol Bay. So we see freezing levels of 2,000 to 4,000 feet coming up across the west coast and into the interior. Also 2,000 to 4,000 feet along the northern Gulf Coast, and even some warmer air starting to punch up near the southern panhandle to about 6,000 feet. Icing on Friday, we have a couple of small areas of considerable moderate icing above about 8,000 feet. That's going to be over the Cook Inlet area as well as over Prince William Sound. And then lots of areas of isolated moderate icing across much of the rest of the state. For Friday, we've got above 4,000 feet for the Brooks Range isolated moderate icing, above 5,000 feet for the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay areas, above 3,000 feet isolated moderate icing for the Aleutians, and above 5,000 feet isolated moderate icing on Friday for the Panhandle. Jet stream on Friday. The main jet is well south of Alaska, but we do have a jet streak coming in about 90 to 100 knots out of the south and southeast across southwest and up into eastern Russia. At 9,000 feet, we see our strongest winds in the same area over southwest, as well as portions of the west coast near the Bering Strait, and then also some strong winds just north of Prince William Sound. So our peak winds are going to be about 55 to 60 knots in those areas, and that's also out of the south and southeast. As we look at 3,000 feet, a little bit of a shift in where our strongest winds are. At 3,000 feet, we're going to see our strongest winds right off the coast from Prince William Sound all the way down across the coast of the Panhandle and the Eastern Gulf, 60 to 65 knots out of the south in those areas. Also looking at 60 knots or even higher out of the southeast, right across the North Slope areas, and 30 to 50 knots across the flatlands of the interior, and that's going to be out of the east on Friday. Finally, for turbulence with that system near Bristol Bay, we will see some isolated severe turbulence potential between the surface and about 4,000 feet on Friday. That's going to be in the Bristol Bay area, the northern Alaska Peninsula, stretching up across the southern portion of Kenai Peninsula and into the northern Gulf, just the Gulf side of Prince William Sound. Stay tuned for more Alaska weather after this.
Howdy, star friends. Trace here. Every winter you can find 2 bears and 2 dogs in the evening stars. So let's get out there and find them. Hit the skies at 9:30 p.m. and face north to find the Big Dipper asterism standing on its handle. These stars mark the rear end and tail of the larger constellation called Ursa Major, or the Big Bear. Now let the 2 stars on the end of the Big Dipper's spoon point you to Polaris, aka the North Star. This marks the end of the Little Dipper and the tail for the constellation Ursa Minor, or the Little Bear. Now, flip around. Looking south, you should see Sirius the Dog Star, the nose of the big dog Canis Major. Up and to the left of Sirius, you'll find another bright star called Procyon. Procyon is part of the little dog constellation Canis Minor. There you have it, 2 dogs and 2 bears. Tell your friends and keep looking up.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining me once again is Cindy Preller. She is the Tsunami Program Manager for the National Weather Service in Alaska region. Thanks for joining us again, Cindy.
Thank you, Dave.
We're talking about tsunami awareness and safety here in Alaska especially, and one of the things that has been one of your main focuses is the Tsunami Ready program. What is that, and how do Alaskans find out more?
Awesome. Yeah, Tsunami Ready is a National Weather Service hosted program in partnership with Storm Ready.
Okay.
And it is a program that we conduct with our partners in the state, but it's mostly community driven. So if a community wants to become Tsunami Ready, well, the first thing they need to do is get a hold of me or their local WCM at a weather forecast office or their tsunami team at the state level.
So, and this is something that's a NOAA grant, so there's money available to help encourage the preparedness at the local level there in the city or the village.
Yeah.
What are some of the places that have done this already?
Oh, our oldest Tsunami Ready city is Seward,
Good.
you know, but also Sitka, Homer, Valdez are the, you know, the main players, but we've got several Tsunami Ready communities that I'm very proud of. It takes several years to accomplish this. And so a few of the things that they do is the tsunami risk will be assessed by someone like me or another scientist will help find out, you know, really what their probability is. We'll create an inundation map, an evacuation map. They'll have a mitigation plan. We will set up some partnerships with the schools, make an evacuation shelter, and then they need to practice. But it is the city that owns the program, really. It's up to them. And many cities would like to have sirens, and so we help them get those, and, you know, and they practice, they have to practice.
Sure. So let's say I'm driving into a place like Seward that's tsunami ready. What are some of the things I should look for as maybe a visitor so I know maybe where I need to go or can be more aware of my tsunami risk?
Absolutely. The Tsunami Ready signage is really blatant. It's this, you know, blue and white curling wave sign, and there's different shapes of signs that'll show you if you are in the hazard zone or where the evacuation routes are and when you're out of shelter.
Okay. So this is a multi-step process that helps the residents be more aware of their own risk, but then also prepare for when that risk arrives.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, many communities sound their sirens daily, some sound them weekly, you know, to make sure everybody knows what they mean. And there's often drills. We have an annual drill once a year. We have Tsunami Awareness Preparedness Week, and that's a good time for each community to do some exercising.
Okay. And is this a program that is unique to Alaska?
Absolutely not. It's national.
Okay.
And all over the country, you'll have the same signage, so it's consistent.
Good. So if I'm taking the kids to California, I should be able to see something familiar.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And, you know, some communities hesitate because they think it'll discourage tourism. And so I would like to tell those communities that what they're actually doing is they're encouraging responsibility.
Sure.
The tsunami's going to happen,
Right.
and it's going to hit every coastline. So, you know, it's not about when, it'll be any time. So the fact that they're showing tourists that they are making steps to be prepared for this, I think would encourage people to want to stay there.
Right, and that would be no different than, say, you or I visiting the Midwest, where we know there's going to be really bad thunderstorms and maybe there's a risk for tornadoes. We're aware of that risk when we go there.
Absolutely. If I see a sign for a tornado shelter, I'm going to remember that.
Right. Okay. All right. So we're just doing a better job of being more prepared with something that's bound to happen again.
I hope so.
Okay. Very good. Where can people go again to learn more about the Tsunami Ready program here in Alaska?
Well, one, there is a Tsunami Ready website. So, you know, just Tsunami Ready,
Google
and that'll
Tsunami
get you
Ready.
there.
Okay.
And then probably the best person for people to contact is their warning coordination meteorologist at their local weather forecast office, which is Anchorage or Juneau, most likely.
Okay. All right. So most of the folks along the Bering Sea coast, again, are not at a huge risk for tsunamis at this
No,
point.
they don't need to worry about it.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. But always learning to be prepared no matter where you are in Alaska, no matter what the risk, always a good step. And tsunami is a major player in that, as we well know from events like 1964.
Alaskans are resilient. I really believe in them.
Very good, very good. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for joining us again, and please make an effort to learn more about the Tsunami Ready program in your village and town if you haven't already. We'll be back with Cindy again next time to talk more about the Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska. We actually have a group of geologists working for the National Weather Service, so scratch your head on that one and we'll join you next time. See you next time on Alaska Weather Packs.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Let's take a look at your marine forecast now, starting with the sea ice edge. The eastern half of the sea ice edge continues to push northward. In fact, the ice edge is now about 75 miles north of St. Paul, whereas just a couple of weeks ago it was wrapped around St. Paul, the ice was. So some pretty big changes continuing, especially for the eastern half of the ice. And as we have strong southeast winds, I should say, winds out of the southeast along the southeastern edge of the ice, we'll see that the ice be pushed a little bit more towards the northwest over the next couple of days. Taking a look at our marine forecast for southeast for Friday, we've got very strong winds coming into the area with gales, high-end gales in the eastern Gulf, 40 to 45 knot winds out of the southeast, bringing seas up to about 19 to 22 feet. Some strong winds even in the inside waterways with gusts up to 35 in the central inside waterways, seas 3 to 8 feet there. For Saturday, we're on the back end of that system. Still some pretty strong winds. We've got gales still, but decreasing more in the northern Gulf to about 25 knots out of the east. Still looking at 40 knots for the eastern Gulf out of the southeast, and still some strong winds up to about 35 knots along the inside waterways. As we head to south central for Friday, we've got strong winds here as well. In fact, that's going to be a consistent pattern across the state with strong winds on Friday. We've got some storm force winds in the northern Gulf, 50 knots out of the east expected, and even through the rest of the Gulf, 40 to 45 knots out of the east and southeast. That's going to be bringing seas up to about 18 to 22 feet. Even in Cook Inlet, we're looking at 35 knots out of the northeast with seas about 7 feet there. As we head into Saturday, we'll be behind that system, so winds definitely coming down quite a bit on Saturday, just 10 to 25 knots in the Gulf and down to about 10 to 15 knots out of the north for Cook Inlet. For Friday, along the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, again, we're looking at strong winds, gale force winds in this area out of the south and southwest for these areas, 30 to 40 knots of wind with seas 17 to about 20 feet on the Gulf side and about 7 to 10 feet on the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula. As we head into Saturday, again, we're going to be behind that incoming system, so those winds and seas are going to be coming down quite a bit. 15 to 25 knots of wind, shifting to more out of the south, and seas coming down to about 12 to 14 feet on the Gulf side with just 4 to 6 feet on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. For the Aleutians on Friday, this is actually the area for once that's going to be maybe the least impacted by this system that's coming in as it comes into kind of the Bristol Bay and Eastern Bering area. So you've got some small craft advisory winds, 15 to 25 knots. Seas highest on the Pacific side of the Aleutians, 14 to 15 feet with 25 knot winds out of the west. As we head into Saturday, we're starting to look at our next system, so winds coming up a bit in the western Aleutians along with seas, 25 to 30 knots of wind out of the west, whereas we're looking at about 20 to 25 knots for the rest of the Aleutians on Saturday. For Friday along the west coast, once again, we've got some gale force winds right along the ice edge south of Nunivak Island, about 40 knots out of the east. Elsewhere, we're looking at 25 to 30 knots. As we head further north in the Bering, we're looking at more northeasterly flow instead of due easterly flow, and seas outside of the ice 7 to 9 feet. Those winds and seas are actually going to be coming up on Saturday as the low pressure system is going to be moving into this area. So we'll be seeing some more gale force winds spreading up into the northern Bering, 35 to 40 knots out of the south and east there. Friday across the Arctic coast, we're looking once again gale force winds across much of the Beaufort Sea as well as the Chukchi Sea, 35 knots out of the east. And then on Saturday, even increasing a little bit, especially in the Beaufort Sea, 35 to 40 knots there, decreasing slightly 25 to 30 knots out of the east across the Chukchi Sea. And to recap, we've got breezy conditions across pretty much the entire state. That's going to be causing blowing snow across much of the mainland, and we have high wind watches in effect for both the Kuskokwim Delta and the southern panhandle over the next couple of days.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.